start. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff of the space.
In our natural pursuit of knowledge, space has always mystified and beguiled us. Over the past 5 decades, we've pushed the final frontier inevitably onward into the ether. The cost has been colossal. Now every day, new data, new conclusions, and the thirst for deeper exploration propel us inexorably onward. The advantages of the discoveries made through space travel are myriad, but the fundamental curiosity as to what is out there will always fascinate and taunt us. Come with us now into the unknown and discover the disappearing frontier. Coming up in this edition, September 29, 1988, 30 months since the Challenger accident. This was to be the return to space. Many changes had been made to the hardware in order to avoid further tragedy, but the world waited anxiously to see if it would be a safe flight of discovery. But first, 13 years previously, in the pre-dawn calm of July 15, 1975, the methodical countdown of Apollo moved with customary precision toward a mid-afternoon launch. Of lesser note was the fact that this would be the last flight of Apollo Saturn. And as the countdown narrowed, chances are that more than one member of the launch team reflected on other proud days of Apollo, like its 9 flights to the moon, 6 of which resulted in landing men there. Its 3 flights to Skylab, transporting crews to the orbiting space station. And now, in 9 days, the entire Apollo program would pass into history. Apollo would make way for a 2-way reusable vehicle, the Space Shuttle, scheduled for its orbital flight debut in 1979. But today it's Apollo's Soyuz, and as dawn approaches the Florida coast, a similar drama is nearing climax half a world away. The scene? Baikonur Launch Complex in Kazakhstan, central USSR. The Soyuz spacecraft, its crew approaching the end of pre-launch checks, is about to signal the start of this historic mission. At Mission Control Moscow, flight controllers monitor Soyuz as it gathers momentum en route to orbital altitude. Less than 9 minutes after launch, Soyuz, powered by triple booster stages, is inserted into its assigned orbit. Launch Control acknowledges a successful launch, while the crew at Kennedy suit up for a 12:37 trip out to Pad B. A near-perfect day for the launch, made to order for the thousands lining the roadsides and beaches in order to witness this Apollo Saturn finale.
Until thrust builds up.
11.
Engine
10,
ready light on.
9,
10, 9, 8,
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
engines
1.
Start. 1, 0. Launch
The launch
commit. We
is a
have
success.
liftoff. All engines building up thrust. Moving out. Clear the tower.
got good thrust on all engines. You're right on the money.
30 seconds, we're on the way.
Stand by for mode 1 Bravo. Mark, 1 Bravo.
1 Bravo, 2 Gs.
Roger.
And cabin pressure's coming down.
Roger. Apollo Houston, you're go for staging.
Roger, go for station. Roger.
Go for staging.
Okay, and that flight is out on the 4B. Got acceleration.
Roger.
We've got acceleration. Apollo is placed in orbit.
Go. Now.
And before the flight is 3 hours old, the docking module is smoothly extracted from the second stage booster left trailing behind. During the next 40 hours, Apollo, through a series of maneuvers, will slowly close the orbital gap with Soyuz. The two crews will meet again, not as members of this or that nationality, but as friends who for 3 years shared their separate cultures and customs and a part of themselves. In preparing for their missions, Soviet and American crews spent a good deal of time together. In formal mission training, him learning about the other man's culture. In getting to know the man himself. Alexei Leonov, Soyuz commander.
Because I want to be a movie star.
Colonel in the Soviet Air Force.
Tom Stafford won.
In 1965, he became the first man to walk in space. The Apollo commander, Air Force General Thomas Stafford. Before this mission, he had flown 3 times in space. He was commander of Apollo 10, the mission that orbited the moon and qualified the lunar module for subsequent lunar landings. A civilian and veteran of the U.S. space program, Donald K. Deke Slayton, one of the 7 original astronauts. He was scheduled to pilot the 4th planned Mercury flight. A slight heart irregularity interrupted his flight career. He was returned to full flight status in 1972 and assigned to Apollo Soyuz as docking module pilot. Another civilian crew member, Valery Kubasov, age 40, the Soyuz flight engineer. On Soyuz 6, he successfully performed the first welding experiments in the microgravity of space. Rounding out the American crew, Vance Brand, civilian, aeronautical engineer, former test pilot. He'd been a backup crew member on previous flights, but this was his first trip into space. He is the command module pilot. The building of the first universal docking system constituted the specific goal of the Soviet-American Space Agreement signed in Moscow in 1972 by the chief executives of both nations. Although each nation designed and built its own half of the docking system, the interface, that is the physical making of the two, was a single decision. Considering the language barrier, the differing technologies, 2 diverse political systems, the development program moved with relative ease. There were differences, to be sure, but none that was above negotiation and compromise. Perhaps Professor Voshulyov put those differences in the proper light. He said, "In our joint work, there has been only one contradiction. Dr. Lunny drinks black coffee, and I drink mine with cream." Apollo Control. The message that the TPI maneuver was successful comes through, and both control centers, Moscow and Houston, have given a go for docking.
That he was station keeping with Soyuz. Both control centers, Moscow and Houston, have given a go for docking.
Soyuz Apollo, track switches. I need you 5x5.
Hello, Houston.
Can you see the Soyuz? He's hidden behind the docking module.
Here he comes, just above the docking module. Looks real pretty.
From Apollo, the view of Soyuz is splendid.
Good show. Let's stay there. Look at that.
I am approaching Soyuz.
The seriousness of the situation is lifted amazingly with some joking banter.
Less than 5 meters distance.
Less than 5 meters distance.
3 meters.
3 meters.
1 meter.
1 meter.
Contact.
Contact.
Capture.
Capture.
We also have
A
capture.
soft docking. Success.
We'll pass it on.
Around the world, millions watch and listen as the two spacecraft become one. Now they wait for the next dramatic event, the meeting of Soviet and American crews. In the next edition of Disappearing Frontier, you'll witness the culmination of this historic flight of Apollo-Soyuz. The 26th mission of the Space Shuttle, the first after the Challenger accident. Safe launch and a safe return was the dominant theme of the crew patch. The red vector from the NASA meatball indicates that they are still building on the strengths of NASA. The 7-starred Big Dipper symbolized their 7 friends lost on the Challenger, and the sunrise represented a new beginning. On September 29, 1988, Discovery was being fueled on the launch pad. The astronauts rose at 5 a.m. and after breakfast and weather briefs, they suited up. Rick Houck, commander of the mission. Colonel Dick Cubby was the pilot. Mission specialist, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Hilmers, Dr. Pinky Nelson, and Mike Lounge. This flight was to be the culmination of efforts of tens of thousands of people across the nation. NASA engineers, contractors, many advisory groups, both inside and outside government. This was to be in every sense a test flight. During the 30 months since the Challenger accident, there had been literally hundreds of hardware changes to not only the rocket booster, but also the orbiter and the large liquid rocket fuel tank. Numerous software changes had been implemented and tested exhaustively. They had trained as a crew for 20 months. When it came time to strap into this 4.5 million pounds of hardware, they were convinced that the team was as ready as they could be. They walked to the bus that would transport them and were cheered by colleagues and friends.
Mike Lounge, Dave Hilmers, and Pinky Nelson, followed by Don Putty.
Engineering director.
It waited on the launch pad. The rocket.
The technical community, and you will have our consensus to proceed with this launch. Good luck and Godspeed. Copy. KSC Safety and Quality Director. Safety and quality has no constraints to launch, Bob.
Goal for auto sequence start. Discovery's 4 redundant computers have assumed
T-minus 23 seconds and counting.
The SRB nozzle profile.
Flight crew close visors. Open.
T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. Go for main engine start. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Americans return to space. Discovery clears the tower. According to those aboard, whether you've flown aboard the shuttle before or not, you're never really quite ready for the experience. Emotions, sight, sound, adrenaline, and motion all meld together in an overwhelming bond. In the crowd are youthful John Travolta, destined to become a huge movie star and a pilot in later years. The solid rocket motors work superbly. The long, hard work of the redesign and test team had paid off in a perfect launch. The motors burn for 2 minutes, but it takes another 6.5 minutes to achieve orbital velocity. The Discovery's liquid fuel engines provide the additional push to accelerate to a speed of 5 miles a second and an altitude of 160 nautical miles. In that orbit, they were to see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day for the next 4 days, traveling over 1 2/3 million miles. Once they were safely into orbit, they got busy with one of the primary objectives for this mission, to deploy a communication satellite for NASA. Rick and Dick in the front seats of the flight deck made checks to ascertain that the orbiter was ready to perform the separation maneuver after the deployment of the Tidris satellite. Meanwhile, Dave and Mike were busy on the aft flight deck, checking the telemetry from the spacecraft and its booster, making sure that it was healthy and ready for deployment. The 5,000-pound complex communication satellite is carried to its 22,000-mile-high orbit by the inertial upper stage, which is the white portion of this 40-foot stack. Mike Lounge's job was to throw a switch to release the stack from the support structure upon getting a go from Mission Control. Then the order came.
Go.
You are go for deploy.
Go. Procedures.
Go.
Payload standing by for your go for deploy. Roger, fine.
Roger.
Discovery, you are go for deploy. Copy, Houston, go for deploy.
Here we see the Tidris-IUS combination shortly after deployment. At the moment of deployment, push-off springs give it a slow and majestic separation from the shuttle. Pinky was the chief photo documenter for the deploy. Rick in the aft flight deck maneuvered the orbiter to give additional separation from the satellite and to position the satellite into view through the overhead window to be tracked visually.
This is really a pretty satellite, really some gorgeous views out the window.
About an hour after the deploy, the first of 2 solid rocket motors fired on the upper stage. These rocket motors placed the satellite in an orbit above the equator so that it would remain fixed relative to the ground. It was to be used by NASA to increase shuttle communications with Mission Control and to be utilized by Landsat to relay telemetry to the ground. Many other private and government agencies were to use this sophisticated satellite. The middeck of the orbiter was used as a microgravity laboratory. It was well used during the flight of Discovery. 11 experiments were carried on board from the Marshall Space Center, JSC, industry and university laboratories all across the country. These range from biomedical investigations like protein crystal growth to material science to an engineering test in an infrared communication system. 2 experiments designed by high school students were performed, both for their scientific value and to encourage young people to develop interest in space science and space flight. Both of these experiments were very visual. One heated titanium wires, the others grew crystals of lead iodide on a membrane. Even on a short 4-day mission, the scientific data from the experiments was significant. Another mid-deck experiment performed was a phase partition experiment. Phase partitioning was used for separating different types of biological cells. This process was found to be beneficial in developing new pharmaceuticals and also in performing biomedical research. After they had shaken the experiment, they photographed the chambers to study the demixing properties which weren't completely understood on Earth at the time. As they flew over Hawaii, the crew expressed a desire to share some of the sights that they'd been privileged to witness over the past few days. And I quote, "As we watch along with you, many emotions swell up in our hearts. Joy for America's return to space, gratitude for a nation's support through difficult times, thanksgiving for the safety of our crew, reverence for those whose sacrifice made our journey possible. Gazing outside, we can understand why mankind has looked towards the heavens with awe and wonder since the dawn of human existence. We can comprehend why our countrymen have been driven to explore the vast expanse of space, and we are convinced that this is the road to the future, the road that Americans must travel if we are to maintain the dream of our Constitution, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. As we, the crew of Discovery, witness this earthly splendor from America's spacecraft, less than 200 miles separates us from the remainder of mankind. In a fraction of a second, our words reach your ears, but lest we ever forget that these few miles represent a great goal, that to ascend through this seemingly tranquil sea will always be fraught with danger, let us remember the Challenger crew, whose voyage was so tragically short. With them we shared a common purpose. With them we shared a common goal. At this moment, our place in the heavens makes us feel closer to them than ever before. Those on the Challenger who had flown before and seen these sights, they would know the meaning of our thoughts. Those who had gone to view them for the first time, they would know why we set forth. They were our fellow sojourners. They were our friends. Today, where the blue sky turns to black, we can say at long last to Dick, Mike, Jeannie, to Ron and Al, and to Krista and Greg, dear friends, we have resumed the journey that we promised to continue for you. Dear friends, your loss has meant that we could confidently begin anew. Dear friends, your spirit and your dreams are still alive in our hearts." Unquote.
Discovery.
America was back in
families
space.
and all of us down here, it sure does feel good to see the Challenger mission continue and America back in space.